will run it at the end of the panel discussion, if you can hear me. Okay, great. And so I think we can already start letting those who are in to join us while we wait for all the speakers. I see we have Rada, we have Gabrielle. Glad to have you, Gabrielle. I hope everything's okay where you are. And I think we're waiting for, yeah, there you go. Verina's joining us shortly. Hi, Verina.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Thanks everyone for your patience. It's a time of the day when the internet can be a bit slow over here. So, and there's a lot of people on the platform. So people are just coming back on.
I think we were having trouble getting into the...
What was that? Sorry?
I was just going to say Mathoni and Lara have already been informed of this and have been exceedingly kind, but I'm working and also providing childcare today for my 3-year-old who's right there and watching her 7th episode of Daniel Tiger this morning. My husband has COVID. So I apologize if we have my barnacle show up.
Yeah,
no need to. It's quite delightful. I can see
apologize isn't the right word, but a heads up.
We understand.
A heads up as to why it has. It's been a you know.
It sounds like
I don't know how to describe the last.
Yeah. Thanks for giving us the time. I think we have Tesma, our moderator, here, which is fantastic, and I do think that's everybody.
No, we have Faith. We're waiting for Faith, so I'll just check in and see if she's okay with what's happening on her end. Yes.
Can I ask a quick? So hi everyone, good to see everyone. And I wanted to ask, and no worries on the small friends that are joining us at all. We understand we've all been in that boat, and I feel very lucky that I'm not in that boat this morning. I wanted to just ask quickly on pronunciations for names, and I think I have for most folks, but Verina, is it Winder or Vinder?
Yes, Winder.
Winder. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking.
And then Radha, is it Vikramasinghe?
It's Vikramasinghe.
Vikramasinghe. Okay. I practiced that one, so okay. Great. Does anyone? The other quick thing was that I significantly shortened folks' bios. I hope that's okay. I tried to just be pretty discreet, like pretty concrete, with just a little bit of background. Everyone has amazing bios, but I want to get to hear your voices and not my voice introducing you. So I hope that's okay.
That's good for me. I'll be less intimidated knowing less about my fellow panelists.
This is an amazing crew of panelists. I'm excited. I think I don't know if folks have been able to catch some of the earlier sessions. I know for me it's been tough because of the time zone issue, but the last one was really great, and it's like some amazing voices and really great scene setting for this one. So hopefully we don't have to do as much of that scene setting, and we can just jump into the conversation. Okay, seems like Faith is here. Oh, Emily, are you able to hear us?
I can.
Can you hear us now? Uh-oh.
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, Emily, we can hear you.
I'm not sure this connection's very good, but it seems a bit better than it was previously.
Okay. I know I saw
You're coming through nice and clear.
Yeah, I know there's some option to do like a lower resolution for the video or something to improve the connection. So maybe that's something if it seems like. Okay. So I'm not sure when we go. Are we on the stage? I don't think so.
Let me try and do that. If it's really bad, I'll just have to turn my camera off and try and do it without camera, I think.
Okay. All I see on the side is you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you. I'm like, are we in the show?
I think we are.
We are. Okay, well. Should we maybe give a couple more minutes to see if, like a minute or two to see if Faith can arrive? Oh, please go ahead. Okay. Let me see if Emily comes back on. Apologies all for some of the technical difficulties. I think we're all getting used to a new format and platform, which is great, but there's always the teething issues. So welcome everyone. I think we are missing a couple folks, but I hope that they will be able to join as we go. So we're just going to get started and see how we go. We're kicking off the final session of the Future is Fearless launch and GBV Accelerator event, which began now many hours ago while most of us here, I think, we're still sleeping, and has set the stage for the GBV prevention community to come together with our many diverse voices to share and build on our collective vision for women and girls in all their diversity to live free from violence. So for those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet, I'm Tesmeralda Atzbaha. I work at Wellspring Philanthropic Fund, where we have been supporting GBV prevention, research, program adaptation, implementation, and now global advocacy work for about 15 years. And now over the past 3 years, collaborating closely with many of you in the community to develop this amazing advocacy initiative that's being born and now publicly today, the GBV Prevention Accelerator, led by my wonderful colleagues, Mithoni and Lara. Hi, Faith. Good to see you here on the screen. So just a couple of quick things in terms of how we are going to go through. I'm going to give a little bit of background today to set the stage for this conversation and do some intros of our wonderful panelists. And then we'll do a quick round of questions and then some deeper questions. And then we'll have some time at the end for folks to ask questions through the chat. So be thinking of your questions as the panel is going on. We've just come, so before I start to set the stage, I was lucky enough to be able to listen in on the previous panel where there was just a presentation that just warmed my heart in terms of the level of excitement and depth at which we can make the case and present all of this information about where we are in this moment. So I won't go over in detail all of that again, but just to give you a small snapshot just to ground our conversation and bring that story, because it's a lot of labor, into this room. We have seen so much critical evidence and the evidence base being built from multiple sectors for how GBV prevention programs can reduce violence at the community level and at the population level, and within a program cycle of 3 to 5 years. And this is due to the innovative work and amazing intelligence of grassroots partners, and also key investments in the development of the evidence base and political commitments from governments. So we can now say with confidence that we know what works to prevent GBV, and we have, synthesized within the RESPECT framework, which I hope most of you are familiar with. It was developed by WHO and UN Women, which lays out these strategies clearly. And this is a complicated context that we are in, because we have found that often policymakers are not aware, do not have a lot of depth of understanding of the evidence, and the visibility of GBV, and particularly prevention of GBV in global advocacy spaces, is still quite low. And as was presented previously by Muthoni, that the funding is very, very low, and at 0.002% of ODA. That's from the assessment that was done by the Equality Institute in 2018. So with that brief in mind, a group from the community of prevention research, of GBV prevention researchers, practitioners, funders, and advocates began to coordinate to develop, about 3 years ago, a shared advocacy agenda. And this was to bring together and have more common messaging around what we need. And what we landed on, unsurprisingly, is that we need increased resources and political commitments for GBV prevention and response. And the accelerator is really the culmination of that work in terms of having a container, having a vehicle, having a champion for that agenda, and building the support through visibility, campaigns, partnerships, and learning. So we're just so excited and so proud to be part of this initiative. And as was mentioned, concurrently, the field has also done a lot of work to develop a global shared research agenda that identifies evidence gaps and highlights priority areas for research that need resourcing, and to help us think about how to scale and how to better understand how to do implementation. So this work has culminated, and at the same time, we're in this moment, in this global advocacy moment of generation equality, which for those who aren't familiar, is the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And the Generation Equality Forum is really the vehicle for accelerating action and political commitments for gender equality globally. And the forum was held last year, and the way that it's structured, and we will hear more from Gabrielle about this, is that it's propelled through multi-sectoral action coalitions led by some of our panelists here today, and they have developed action plans for the different thematic areas, including gender-based violence. So during the forum last year, an important collective commitment was made by the community, or the community that has been developing this advocacy initiative. That's our shared advocacy agenda, which calls for $500 million in new money, $500 million in new money for GBV prevention by 2026, and that half of the world's governments have developed funded GBV national action plans, GBV prevention and response national action plans. And there were also commitments around the scale-up of evidence-based GBV prevention programming. So here we are. That was last year, June. We are a year later from the forum. We have the co-leads of the Action Coalition who've been part of a lot of work to put those commitments into action, or into conditions for action to happen. And we have the commitment makers here. So we wanted to take this moment to reflect on, after a year in, what do those commitments really mean to us, and how can we collaborate to accelerate the funding, the policy advancements, and the partnerships to ensure that we can achieve them. So I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists today. We have Emily, Faith, Verena, Radha, and Gabrielle. And then we'll get to the questions. So, and many of you may be familiar with folks, but it's always great to hear about the where folks sit within our ecosystem, and also just to hear about the wonderful work that they've done. So I'll start with Emily Esplin, who's the head of the Ending Violence team in the United Kingdom's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. She previously managed the Department for International Development's flagship £25 million global What Works to Prevent Violence research and innovation program. And she has provided, in that role, she provided leadership to the consortia across 16 countries and then led the design of the current £67.5 million program, what we internally call What Works 2.0, and which is the first global effort to systematically test the scale of violence against women and girls prevention. She also serves as the co-lead on the GEF, the Generation Equality GBV Action Coalition, and is an advisory group member for the SVRI, Equality Institute, UNICEF Inocente, and the Accelerator for GBV Prevention. We are also joined by Faith Kasiva, who currently serves as the Secretary of Gender Affairs for the Government of Kenya. She has over a decade of experience in advising government, United Nations, and international nonprofits on gender affairs. She was previously the Executive Director for the Coalition on Violence Against Women in Kenya. And we're also going to hear from Verena Winder. She's the Senior Advisor in the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues at the U.S. Department of State, where she leads policy development, interagency coordination, and strategic operations. She previously served as the Senior Manager for Global Partnerships and Strategic Engagement at Family Planning 2020, which aims to expand access to family planning information services and supplies to an additional 120 million women and girls. We'll also hear from Radha Vikramasinghe, who's a program officer on the Gender, Racial, and Ethnic Justice Program at the Ford Foundation. She leads their Ending Gender-Based Violence portfolio, and she's previously worked on women's rights at the London-based Sigrid Rousing Trust, where she managed a broad portfolio of grantees in Sub-Saharan Africa, Central America, and Europe to combat violence against women and girls, defend sexual and reproductive rights, and strengthen movements for women and girls in the Global South. She currently serves as a co-lead on the GEF GBV Action Coalition. Sorry for all of the acronyms, but we it's trying to make it quicker, and is part of the GBV Prevention Accelerator Advisory Group. And last but not at all least, we are going to hear from Gabrielle Henderson, who's a policy specialist on the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls team at UN Women, and is the thematic lead for the GEF Action Coalition on GBV, where she coordinates the members, provides technical leadership, and supports the commitment making in line with the blueprint of the Action Coalition. As a policy specialist, she focuses on the elimination of harmful practices, violence against children, and hate speech. She previously managed the UN Women's multi-country office Caribbean portfolio on ending violence against women and girls. So now that we got that out of the way, and now we can actually hear the voices of our wonderful speakers, I wanted to do a quick warm up and ask, in one sentence or less, what is the one thing that excites you about where we are right now in this moment in terms of GBV prevention? And so I'm going to start with Gabrielle.
Sorry, technology to unmute. I would say movement, Tashnila. I think that's my word, that it's about movement and action.
Great. Yes, I like that. Radha?
I think, Gabrielle, you stole my line. So I think what particularly excites me right now is that there's a discussion about systemic and structural drivers of violence and the important role of feminist movements in preventing that violence.
All right, so moving to Verena.
Sure. So Tesmer, you talked a little bit about how this launch is actually 3 years in the making. It's not just the planning leading up today, but like the launch has actually been 3 years. I remember the very early days of discussion around what this could potentially look like. So when you ask about what in this moment is exciting, it is this moment. It is the fact that we've got here, that we've climbed this mountain to get here.
Faith? Oh, I think she may be frozen. Okay. Well, we will come back to her. So, Emily?
I'm excited that as a field, we now have evidence that shows unequivocally, as you said, that we can prevent violence against women and girls, and it doesn't have to take us generations. So we now have the first generation of knowledge that we can act on, and I think that's something that we should be really celebrating. But I am particularly excited today by the launch of the accelerator, because I really think this has the potential to be transformative in mobilising more and better funding to put this evidence into action to make a difference for women and girls. So that's what I'm excited about today.
Thank you. So circling back, Faith, we lost you for a second, but I think you're here now. In one sentence, what are you excited about right now?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and great to see everyone. I think I'm excited about the growing attention to prevention and response to GBV, not just in my country, but just globally, which then, in essence, then translates to action and also investment in prevention and response to GBV. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll come back to you now, Emily, to ask a bigger question. So obviously, after 7 years of the What Works program, there has been so much knowledge and so many insights learned and developed. And what, from your perspective, do you feel like is the biggest learning that came out of the first phase of the What Works program? And can you tell us about how that's informed where the new program is going?
Sure. So about half of the pilots that we evaluated under the first phase of our What Works to Prevent Violence program led to significant reductions in violence of around 50% within 2 to 3 years. And that was incredibly exciting. But actually, some of the most productive learning came from when we reflected on what hadn't quite worked in the way we'd hoped and why, and how we could use those insights to refine and continue to strengthen the field. And some of this was about intervention design and the models that we were using. Actually, a lot was about implementation. It was really about the how as well as the what. And in particular, I think we saw very clearly the critical importance of having carefully selected, experienced, well-trained and supported community activists, facilitators and staff. And that really proved to be at the heart of the success of those What Works projects that saw reductions in violence. So, I mean, one of the reasons that I'm a fan of the accelerator is the focus on investing in approaches that are both evidence-based and practice-informed. And I think it's really important that we continue to capture and elevate that practice-based learning. We are committed to doing this under the second phase of What Works, which brings me to your second question about where are we going next. So I'm really excited that at the Generation Equality Forum this time last year, we launched our commitment, the start of phase 2 of our What Works programme, which, as you said, Tesma, is investing £67.5 million over the next 7 years in evidence-based and practice-informed prevention. Our priority is to test the scale of effective evidence-driven approaches, recognising that this is not going to be easy. We've had some success with small-scale projects to prevent violence, but I think as a field, we still have quite limited understanding of how complex social change innovation can be expanded and scaled up without compromising quality, effectiveness, sustainability, and ethics. So that's really the challenge at the heart of the second phase of What Works, including grappling with the question of how we can harness large-scale sector platforms and systems to optimise their impact on reducing violence, such as how can we use the education system as an entry point for primary prevention by shaping children's understanding, values, beliefs around gender, norms, roles, relationships from a young age. Our second priority alongside scale up is to continue to invest in innovation. Because while we think we need to be investing in those approaches that we now know or can be relatively confident about, it's really important to continue to test new theory-driven solutions in areas where we still really don't know very much, such as prevention in conflict and crisis, or for the most marginalised groups of women experiencing multiple intersecting forms of discrimination. So very soon we'll be opening our first What Works grants window for both innovation and scale-up grants. And please do keep an eye on the website if you're interested and share widely so that we can find the most exciting, promising approaches to put our investments behind. And I think the last thing to say is that, of course, we know that the UK can't do this on our own, and critical focus for what we do, and one that I think aligns really closely with the ambition of the accelerator, is to improve the use of the existing evidence base to drive more effective policy and practice investment, doing that in partnership with others, especially to improve funding for Southern women's rights organisations. So I want the evidence that we now have and will continue to generate under the second phase to really be game-changing and catalysing more effective action and investment in the most promising approaches to prevent violence. And that's why I'm really excited today and proud to have been part of shaping the new Accelerator initiative, because I really believe it's only by coming together around a shared agenda and joint action that we can really start to see a move towards a response that is more truly commensurate with the scale of the challenge. And we're really determined that in the UK, we will continue to play our part with others in this crucial effort. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's really exciting.
Thank you as well. And thank you for sharing that. It's exciting to see, you know, having been along the ride of the last couple of years with you, it's exciting to see the program launch and the incredible consortia that is involved. That's really drawing from movements and from all of these, you know, important partners who really contributed so much to the learning as well. So really exciting stuff. So shifting or moving over to you, Faith. I wanted to talk to you about some pretty bold and exciting commitments that were made around GBV prevention at the Generation Equality Forum last year, and wanted to ask if you could share more information about those commitments from the Kenyan government and how the plans are going for the implementation, and what would success look like in 2026 in your perspective around these commitments.
Thank you, and I hope you can hear me. I have unstable internet. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh dear. Okay, very well. Just to respond to your question is first to say that never before in the history of our country GBV prevention and response has received this much attention. And I'm speaking, having been an advocate
Faith, we can't hear you anymore. I don't know whether you can hear us. And we appear to have lost Tesma as well.
Oh my goodness, technology today. It's not smiling on us. Faith, I'm so sorry, we've lost you. So while we wait for you to reconnect, if you can hear me, we'll move on with the panel, and we have Tesma back. Tesma, we're sorry, we lost you. We also lost Faith, and I was just about to step in and move forward and ask a question to Verena while we waited for Faith to reconnect, but I can hand back over to you now if you like.
Thank you. Yeah, apologies. In my efforts to try to touch the screen and find Faith, I ended up taking myself out of the room. Apologies. So hopefully we'll be able to circle back to Faith if we can figure it out, the technology. So Verena, there's so much to share, and there's so much excitement. You know, I think for all of us when the new the Biden administration came in, and the US's commitment to, you know, really strengthening and really like stepping into a commitment to gender equity with the first ever White House Gender Policy Council, which is very, very exciting. And in that foregrounding GBV prevention with having a senior advisor for GBV prevention as part of that. And now with the development of these two interlinked linked policies guiding the domestic work and the international work. So we'd love to hear about some of the, in this process of developing these policies, some of the priorities that you've identified, and how this, you know, this process of developing them together, a domestic and international policy, you know, and what do you see some of the challenges, but also some of the benefits of that?
Sure, and thank you so much for the question. And I really do want to acknowledge that despite all of the technological challenges for this, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to have space with colleagues from around the globe. It's sort of a new normal, and the benefit is that we get to talk to each other across time zones and across governments and across different sector efforts. But of course, the downside is sometimes we have to deal with unexpected glitches. So Tesmar, you really did pinpoint exactly kind of the shift for at least our administration as it happened in January of last year, and leading up to you asked Faith from Kenya a similar question about commitments made at the Generation Equality Forum. And so two of those, and those two interlinked policies that you just mentioned, include one, a commitment to update our 2016 strategy, which is all about preventing and addressing gender-based violence globally. And then two, a commitment to develop our first ever U.S. National Action Plan to end gender-based violence here in the United States. Now, this is a really exciting first step forward, because while we have long had the Violence Against Women Act, which is a piece of domestically focused legislation that actually then Senator Biden and now President Biden authored and really championed, this is encompassing sort of much more than the grants that we currently provide through DOJ and HHS to really look holistically at our government. I want to, before I talk a little bit more about how I see those two strategies coming together and some of the best practices and some of the things that we as bureaucrats tend to talk about, I do want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is, of course, the Supreme Court ruling here in the United States last Friday. For those of you who do not follow the U.S. news as closely, on Friday, the Supreme Court overturned the ruling from 1973 that held that women in the United States did have a constitutional right to seek an abortion. I want to be clear that the Biden-Harris administration remains resolutely and completely committed to advancing and protecting sexual and reproductive health and rights. We see these as essential to achieving health equity, gender equality. And not only is this a policy commitment, but it will not, and it does not change our reproductive health programming or funding. We are going to continue to support global SRHR programs, including through comprehensive programming on voluntary and high-quality family planning, maternal and child health care, post-abortion care, and of course, prevention and response to gender-based violence. We know and we recognize that comprehensive care for survivors of sexual violence includes the need for time-sensitive access to CMR, to clinical management of rape, which includes but isn't limited to EC, HIV prophylaxis, all of these things that we know is critical and that the UK's research has really underscored as it has come out. So I want to state that up front. I think that the second elephant in the room you may have just heard is my 3-year-old daughter, who is joining me in this discussion today. We'll try to not acknowledge her as forcefully, but apologies in advance if she does interrupt. So going back to the policy documents, it's been 10 years really since the first drafting of the global GBV strategy. I was actually grateful to be personally involved in that first sort of scoping out and sketching out of what this GBV strategy is. And so to be here 10 years later with an update to that work and also a whole of government push behind it is exciting. So I'll talk a little bit about the process, what we learned in 2012 and what we're putting into practice now. So first, of course, I think others will underscore this, but the importance really of political leadership. President Biden has long championed GBV, as I just talked about. And this was really one of the very first steps that he took, as Tesmer mentioned, tasking the new first ever White House Gender Policy Council with coordinating the development of both of these policies. So yes, hold on. Second, in addition to political leadership, we have been really thoughtful about how we conduct consultations to bring us, to bring in some of the things that Emily has talked about, what we've learned over the past 10 years. Both our National Action Plan, which is the domestic component, and the global gender-based violence strategy have been informed by a really robust consultation process with both, internal U.S. government staff, as well as external stakeholders. We have, I'll just say this just for the State Department because we're really running this process. We've conducted over the past 6 months, 200, we've touched or responded or engaged with more than 200 organizations in the development of the strategy. 3, again, whole of government is kind of a bureaucratic speak, but it really is important to us that we have not just the Global Women's Issues Office at the State Department and the Office of Violence Violence Against Women at DOJ really focused on these issues, but rather that there are multiple federal agencies seeing themselves in these documents, teasing out some of these nuances. So we're in to shift somewhat from process, and I know I've droned on a little bit here, but we're in the final stages of developing the global GBV strategy right now. And I want to just a few priorities. You asked about those, Tesmer, too. We are focused on that sort of integration of GBV so that people see themselves against not just in a document, but really in, if it's a drug program, for example, are we also incorporating GBV? 2, we really are committed to putting survivors at the center, doing this in a trauma-informed way. 3, strengthening all of our internal efforts. Emily talked about moving to scale. We want to do that too. And one of the ways that we need to do that is by training our own staff. And then in terms of just noting a few differences that I expect to see in the final version of the strategy. So I'm curious to see if we'll see all of this. We are looking at increasingly how GBV is impacted by climate, how GBV is impacted by technology. Some of you may have seen that we've recently launched both a global effort focused on this and a domestic effort on this. These are things that we're really seeing, where violence is fomented online actually translates to the real world. So thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for bearing with my daughter. But we are still excited to implement all of the things that President Biden talked about and tasked us with when he came in. We know that there are some renewed challenges in that work. I want to acknowledge that. And I want to also thank all of you for continuing to stand. Somebody talked about the excitement of the movement, and we know that we need to be a part of that movement too.
Thank you so much, Marina, and thank you for acknowledging the big political changes that are happening in the moment. I know that that's definitely sitting with me and my community for those of us who are based in the U.S. And I also want to recognize that you are taking the labor of doing that acknowledgement here with us, and also the labor of having to manage childcare this morning. So just calling that and holding that for you, and we're all here in solidarity with you, and really appreciate you giving us this time. So I wanted to shift to you, Radha, my partner in crime here from the philanthropy sector, and just to talk a little bit about within Ford's GBV strategies, there's been identification of some of the key challenges and gaps that the field have been experiencing, and particularly movements have been experiencing. And how do you see collective advocacy and multi-stakeholder collaboration, such as the GEF Action Coalition, addressing these challenges, and of course other multi-stakeholder work as well?
Thanks, Tesma, and thank you, Verena, for acknowledging both the elephants in the room. So I won't have to at least talk about one of them, which I wanted to talk about. So just in answering Tesma's question, let me start by saying that and explaining that Ford's overarching strategy as a foundation is to address inequality. And it's under that umbrella that our Gender, Racial and Ethnic Justice International program that I work on, and the strategy to address GBV sits. And I'll highlight some of the challenges identified by our strategy and the priorities informed by those challenges, which I think is relevant to this discussion and the question. Firstly, around resourcing, specifically the amount, the quality, and the direction of that resourcing. So our analysis in our strategy is that insufficient resources are going to Global South-led feminist movements and organizations who we believe are best placed to undertake contextually specific and effective program prevention strategies. And we place them at the center of our work. And we also recognize that there are many more actors in the GBV prevention space than there were, and this is a good thing, but there is definitely a lack of coordination and collaboration around both the resourcing as well as the knowledge, things that Emily and others have talked about today. And we want to build those partnerships so that they're geared towards supporting the vision of survivors, activists, and movements of women and girls. And within that, a key constituency for us are women and girls facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and violence. And we believe that knowledge of what that looks like and targeted funding for that work is missing. So for us, supporting practice-based learning with, for example, Indigenous women and communities, women with disabilities, gender diverse people, and disseminating that knowledge and practice is a priority. And lastly, but not least, at the multilateral level, we believe that there needs to be greater accountability and connection to constituencies in the Global South. So, which is why for us, the intentionality and commitment to a multi-stakeholder vision presented by the Generation Equality Forum and the Action Coalition on GBV was so compelling for us as a foundation. And while we have focused on the GBV Action Coalition as a co-leader, we have also been involved in other allied action coalitions in different ways. And our commitments have been across a number of the action coalitions, which I think is important because all of these issues are connected. So we've been clear from the outset that for us, the process and our involvement was almost as important as the outcome or the outcomes. And the innovation in bringing together a cross-section of stakeholders working on GBV to build consensus on a way forward was what drew us into this process. And within that, particularly the opportunity to have feminist organizations and civil society sitting around the table with governments, the private sector, multilateral agencies, and participating in that conversation as equals. And particularly in a context where we're seeing so much regression and backlash and the shrinking of spaces for civil society, I think for us, the space and opportunity to both hold the line and push for more implementation and accountability through the Action Coalition with civil society has been really important. And I think because of that intentional design, I think we've seen things emerge much more strongly in the discussions in the Action Coalition that we might not have done, that might not have been there before otherwise. I'm talking about things like the recognition that we need to take a structural and intersectional approach to designing policies and programs, and to understand who's being overlooked and why and how. So that analysis can feed better and more targeted policies and programs. And of course, the central role of autonomous women-led and girl-led organizations who are working on the front lines of preventing and responding to GBV. We did recognize that fulfilling those very laudable sort of intentions was not going to be without challenges. And to be frank, I think there have been many that we can acknowledge, because after all, consensus building is messy, it's time consuming and not always generative. And it can also mean that, you know, we reach the lowest common denominator of agreement, or sometimes no agreement at all. So what we've seen in the Action Coalition is that despite some progress on language related to diversity and intersectionality, we're still finding it hard to make that concrete. I think we also have experienced firsthand the challenge of creating distinctions between different forms of violence, or a hierarchy among them. And when things get difficult, we can often default to more process, which can also get us bogged down and hinder progress. So maintaining the engagement of all stakeholders over a long process and period of time is also difficult to sustain. So moving forward, I think if we're really going to get the most out of the Action Coalition and the Generation Equality Forum, and here I think is where I think the accelerator is going to be an important part of that process, is on two fronts. Really, first, to sustain and expand the political will and leadership that's going to be required to maintain the momentum. And I think for the Action Coalition, that means being more streamlined about process, bringing greater clarity and communication about what we're doing, but also acknowledging, quite honestly, some of the challenges and the blocks that we face. And then secondly, I think we also need to ensure that the process and discussions that are taking place at the global level are not delinked from discussions and are mirrored by similar processes at a more national level and transnational level, so that we're always remembering who we're trying to serve and not being completely detached from that purpose and communities on the ground. So I think, really, just to summarize, I think for us at the Ford Foundation, we look at GBV prevention work as an ecosystem in both our grant making and advocacy. And I think that's where I think the accelerator to prevent GBV can really help in being part of that ecosystem and connecting with the other initiatives such as the Generation Equality Forum, and really drive forward our agenda together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. As you're sharing your reflections, I'm just thinking so much of how we really need each other and the different identities that our institutions and our own selves with our lived experience bring to this, and how we make each other better. So in hearing that, I feel like the push to push my own institution to increase or improve our own analysis, and how I appreciate being in spaces with folks who have all of that experience of, you know, particularly the global advocacy engagement experience that Ford and brings to this from so much work. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to shift quickly to Gabrielle, who is sitting in the center of these action coalitions, doing, you know, a lot of really complex work. And I just wanted to ask you about multi-stakeholder partnerships, because that is at the core of the Action Coalition model, and was critical in the co-design of the blueprint. And what do you see as some of the challenges, successes, and the potential that can be met through this approach?
Great, thank you so much, Tesma, and great to be here with everyone today, and with leaders who are online with me as well. And thank you to the Accelerator team and the Future is Fearless team, I have to say, for having me here with you. So just a bit about the Action Coalition to start. I think we've mentioned, and there'll be some links in the chat as well, the Generation Equality Forum Action Coalitions are an outcome of the Generation Equality Forum and its processes leading up to the forum in Paris last year. And the GBV Action Coalition focuses on addressing gender-based violence against women and girls in all their diversity. It's comprised of a leadership body of 17 leaders from across civil society, governments, private sector, philanthropies, international organizations and youth organizations, and a number of over 400 commitment makers at present who also represent the same stakeholder groups. The Action Coalition has been in operation now for approximately 2.5 years, essentially initiating and collectively building out the blueprint as a policy document that we've heard discussed today. And this happened really during the COVID-19 pandemic, all virtually. And as we see today, the many challenges with virtual interaction, but also the many benefits. So in terms of the challenges, I think one of the key challenges in any multi-stakeholder partnership, and particularly the Action Coalitions, which aim to center principles of feminist leadership, intersectionality, and transformative change, is ensuring that each partner in a partnership as large as this not only has a voice, but that space is created to facilitate meaningful participation. This means participation that is not only actively inclusive of varying and sometimes opposing perspective, but which also actively challenges traditional perspectives of whose voice matters most. Having to work across language groups, time zones, age groups, and identities requires a commitment, I think, also to reflective practice. From the perspective of the role of UN Women as convener of the GBVAC, this has also meant, and I think continues to mean, a conscious effort backed by deliberate action to ensure inclusion and to challenging and calling out both internally, so within the organization, and externally, both personally and professionally, what can sometimes present as entrenched ways of working, which can operate as barriers to inclusion, barriers to diversity, to meaningful participation, and to transformative change, and which can also create hierarchies of value between and among stakeholders. So that's key. The blueprint of the GBVAC, which is in the Global Acceleration Plan, I would say has been one of the key successes of the Action Coalition so far. This blueprint took us approximately 15 months to develop, and the leaders online will attest to this process, with monthly and oftentimes weekly meetings and very intense discussions, all taking place virtually. The process of development of the blueprint, I think, was a true demonstration of the commitment of all leaders and required significant, substantial technical input around GBV prevention and response, significant negotiation, discussions, and also I'd say a dedication to these processes. Since the Paris Forum, leaders have continued to work to build out key work streams of the Action Coalition, which aim to support collective advocacy, knowledge sharing and knowledge building, and accountability. In addition to the blueprint, I'd say also as a concrete output of the Action Coalition, the coming together of diverse leaders, the relationships and the partnerships forged during the pandemic, which has been one of the most difficult times for humanity, I think, plus also having now 400 commitment makers who have seen this vision of the Action Coalition, also signed on to be a part of it. I think this has created what I believe to contain many of the ingredients for the type of cohesion needed at this moment in time to build and drive momentum for transformative change in the lives of women and girls. So what are some of those ingredients? I would say a common agenda of action, belief in the power and relevance of collective multi-stakeholder action, really kind of centering that belief that we move beyond sort of individual to multi-stakeholder processes. And the trust in partners and partnerships. And I think that for me, another one is what a mentor of mine always used to tell me, Gabrielle, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And by this I mean, and Radha spoke about this, that in the negotiations, we don't always agree. We have sometimes different and opposing positions, but coming to that blueprint was a way of agreeing a way forward that all members had some level of comfort with, that I'd say leaders didn't feel fundamentally challenged or compromise their positions on politics, but which may not have been ideal for individual stakeholders, but reflect a vision of common good. So that's, I think, really a critical element and something that had really come through in this partnership. The realization of the potential of the GBV Action Coalition and of this multi-stakeholder partnership depends, I'd say, also on successful achievement of a few key elements. One, the ability to demonstrate genuine impact. And this is made visible in progress towards targets of the Action Coalition, but also in narratives of impact from practitioners and women and girls. And this also must be backed by what I frame as sustainable accountability. So something that wears over time, and by data. I think also the ability to drive evidence, and we spoke about this, practitioner-based interventions at scale. This requires resourcing, part of the objectives of the accelerator and the shared advocacy agenda. And it's also a target of the GBV Action Coalition. Also requiring effective and innovative ways of sharing and exchanging knowledge and experience, and of valuing, and I think this point about valuing diversity of knowledge and experience is also a critical element of any potential success of a multi-stakeholder type partnership. The issue of both the sort of global north, global south engagement, leadership across the action coalitions is key, as well as the cross-thematic engagement. And I think Verena spoke to this. How is GBV intersect with technology and innovation action coalition? How is it intersecting with climate? And it is in that sort of nexus of the work around gender-based violence that I think we will see this kind of propelling of the change that we want to see. Another key element is the collective advocacy and effective communication. And this is part of the reason we're here today with the launch of the Futures Fearless campaign and the accelerator. And then I'll just close by saying, you know, in unity, there is really strength. So the last kind of key element of this potential success that I'll speak to is really this ability to maintain cohesion, collective action, collective momentum, and collective motivation. UN Women has a significant role as the convener of the Action Coalition to play in this, but this is also sort of the role and at the heart for each leader, each stakeholder, each commitment maker on the Action Coalition. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. So much rich insight, I think, in terms of how the way we work is so linked to our values and trying to be values aligned in our ways of operating and our practices with each other and as we're in relation with each other. So we're going to close out. We have, we've really gotten to hear some amazing perspectives and from some very passionate policymakers here today from different parts of our ecosystem, and all working towards this collective vision of increasing resources and political action towards the prevention of GBV. We've heard a lot about, some challenges that have been identified and the way, and, some strategies for how to work through those challenges and how we're holding those challenges together. Some of them, some very open and transparent, I think, reflections on the shortcomings of our own institutions, of the broader global aid infrastructure, some gaps in terms of the capacity within our community and our movement, and how complex the work is to build trust-based, meaningful partnerships, and particularly in the politically volatile and polarizing times that we are in, just to acknowledge that there's this broader context that we've all been working in. And I think just, one quick things before we do the final thank you is just to offer a reflection of this work of being in community and working together, really, and building something together. And I think building the accelerator, which all of our partners and all of the folks who are on this panel have been part of in different ways, is really about that is the work. It's not just, collaboration, but it's deeper than that, because we're really building up those muscles as movements to be able to you know, learn together, be part of something that's bigger than us together. And the accelerator is a part of that connective tissue. And I think that having that connective tissue and partners who are really playing in those, you know, in those spaces between and able to be those bridges between the different parts of our ecosystem is so critical, and to me is really a sign of the strength and the resilience of our community and the broader movement. So finally, I want to thank colleagues for such a rich discussion. I want to acknowledge Faith wasn't able to continue, her internet connection was lost, but we did post the Kenya GEF commitment in the chat, so folks can see that, and we'll follow up with more information, or there'll be ways to get more information about that commitment. Thank you for sharing so generously with your time and your thought leadership, and for your openness and honesty and being in community today. Thank you to Lara and Methoni for all of their work in designing this session and the whole, you know, all of the sessions today, which have really sparked, I think, a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm for, you know, beginning this journey together. And for folks, and finally for, you know, the panelists, for Lara Methoni, for Apolitical, for you know, managing the platform and getting us all set up. And to you who've joined today, I hope this is just the beginning of us being part of these discussions and dialogues together. And I hope you will become a co-creator with the GBV Accelerator. There are lots of opportunities, and I know they've been sharing them on how to get the word out and to amplify the messages, obviously through your own social media and other networks as well. So please move forward with that in mind, and thinking about the Future is Fearless campaign and where we can go next together. And so with that, I think we're going to close out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tesma. As Joe spotlights us again, and as you go backstage, wonderful panel, I'll just say a few words. Thanks. Okay.